have in here today Mr. David Smith, the Executive Director of the Pearl Coalition. How you doing, Mr. Smith?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Great. Glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith, can you give a short overview of the Pearl Escape?
I can. The Pearl Escape took place in 1841, and we like to tell a story by saying just for $100, 77 slaves were able to escape from Washington, D.C. on their way to freedom. It started with two families adamant about getting their daughters specifically to freedom before being sold into sexual bondage, and also freeing the rest of their children who had been unsuccessful at being able to purchase out of slavery. Most of these slaves lived in Georgetown at the time, and Daniel Bell and Sam Edmondson had enough. Mm-hmm. And it was time to get their family free, and by all means necessary to some extent by escaping at this point in history. They were able to, by working with churches, actually charter a boat called the Pearl by way of the Underground Railroad through networks all the way as far-reaching as New York City, who were able to convince these two captains who were white to help these slaves, or these enslaved people here in Washington, D.C., get freedom. Word spread rapidly throughout the churches, both white and black, that this escape was happening, unbeknownst to the powers that be. So what started out probably as a small escape of two families turned into a very large escape of 77 people. Mm-hmm. That night in 1848, they made their way down to the Southwest waterfront from all over, from Virginia, Alexandria, from Maryland, mm-hmm. areas down Route 1, Indian Head Highway, just further down that way along the Potomac, Calvert County, as far as Bury Farms here in Southeast, Georgetown, Southwest waterfront area, even in places on Capitol Hill. Slaves came from all over, along with freedmen and other individuals who were helping to get these people free. They left the night of a celebration here in Washington because the French had just achieved freedom by way of their revolution. So everyone was celebrating. It was the perfect cloak to escape. So they got on the Pearl with the help of these churches, both white and black, these white captains, these African-American, both free and enslaved, on their way down the Potomac River. Right at the Point Lookout, the winds were too rough. They had to dock. And in just that short amount of time while docking, while the sun rose again, they were captured by run-in, and that ended their escape. However, it still was a successful escape, barring the wind, even though they were captured. And it sent a wave, a shock wave, mm-hmm. throughout Congress and the nation as it relates to people's perception about slavery and the impact it was having on these families. Because so many people were involved of all races, all sexes, all socioeconomic background, it also sent a separate type of wave that maybe this is not as acceptable as a practice as we thought, mm-hmm. In our culture and our society. And there are tons of stories that are surrounding the Pearl Escape, including the Civil War that resulted from the momentum that this escape
So the
started.
Pearl Coalition that you're leading up is doing a lot to recapture this great legacy, this great event. But why build the Pearl Schooner?
The Pearl Schooner is going to be built as a living, moving memorial to the people who had the courage to do whatever it took for their freedom. All right, that schooner will be as relevant here in D.C. as the monument in the Capitol for generations to come. Our goal is to raise an endowment that will sustain the Pearl indefinitely, to allow this history to be told. We believe that this hidden piece of history helps illustrate the courage of Americans, not just for the enslaved people that were part of the escape, but the abolitionists who were not African American who participated, because they had just as much to risk by doing so. We want to make sure this story stays around so we can tell not only the story of the heroism and the bravery of these people who escaped, but as well as the danger that slavery can bring if these stories are forgotten.
Yes. So you've made some great strides. You've purchased a Valkyrie schooner. Tell me and socialize to us how you're going to use the young people in this great endeavor.
Right. Well, the Pearl Coalition sets out really to do three main things. The first thing is to tell an untold story. Secondly, we want to make sure we tell a story of unity, mm-hmm. as it relates to the abolitionists working hand in hand with these people who were enslaved and free. And thirdly, which speaks to your point about involving the young people, often we can't always save everyone, mm-hmm. but young people are like sponges. Right. They absorb as much information as you can give them, and as much truth honor, integrity, spirituality, and culture we can impart into our young at an early age, we can see the fruits of that planting, or we can harvest the fruit of the soul or the seeds that we sowed in those young people for future generations. So we believe it's very important, and we'll use the Pearl and the story of the Pearl to do education in schools. We'll use young people as the teachers and instructors. So we'll have peer teaching peer. We're going to use peer leadership. We're going to create job and entrepreneurial and employee-owned opportunities. We want to start teaching them about business on an international level and entrepreneurism and having the ownership of your product.
Yes.
So we're not looking to create employment situations, even though we'll have them initially. We're looking to create leadership and entrepreneurs and owners. So that's what we're going to foster with this entire package, from selling, tours, merchandising, media, and music and arts. So we're going to have all of these things, but all of them going to be an opportunity for our young people to be expressive, learn about their culture and history and spirituality, and also make some money. The faith community has always been, and hopefully will always continue to be, the consciousness of a nation. You know, our forefathers wrote, and all their writers, especially around the formation of the Constitution and in the Federalist Papers, about a democratic society being driven by moral principle. And without moral and ethical principle, capitalism and democracy mixed could become a dangerous combination because it would foster greed.
Yes.
And slavery is what that is. Slavery is an example of greed gone unchecked. But the fact that the American Constitution gave protections to faith communities, and faith communities then drove laws and legislations that had moral and ethical values and principles, we were able to then eradicate those greedy influences and do away with slavery. So the faith community usually did their services under cloak. A large portion of the Underground Railroad was through both white and black churches. If it wasn't for the influence of the church, America really would not be what it is now. I mean, for instance, our first president taught Bible school. He was the first superintendent here in DC and wrote in our law that all students had to learn how to read the Bible. So that's how intertwined faith is, not only in our Constitution, but in our government. My grandfather started his professional career after coming back from the Korean War as working in the Department of Planning. He was the interim director for planning. So he left government to form his own nonprofit in Ward 7. After building that up, he then left and became a chairman of NCRC, where he started working on his Southwest Waterfront development project that is now underway. He actually hired the president, who is now one of the partners in the Hoffman Development Project, to make sure this vision happened. So her and I really share a common goal. Her to make sure the development happens as it relates to this vision, and me making sure the foundation of that vision, which was the Pearl Schooner being the hub of culture that then would drive the prosperity of the entire project.
Yes.
He believed by putting the Pearl at the centerpiece of the Southwest Waterfront development, it would give us something like New Orleans has food, and you know, you can go to Kansas City for barbecue.
Yes.
You can come to DC Southwest Waterfront for pure cultural, historical experiences that you can only get here right in the hub of the nation's capital. And he knew, now that was wise as a developer, he knew that was what you needed, was a draw.
Yes.
But as an African-American man who was passionate about history and young people, he knew that this would be a way to connect those young people from these disconnected communities to one of the most valuable resources we have: water, access to the nation's capital, access to opportunity, access to employment. And he knew this was a way to combine both his passions in one venue.
Now, if our 350,000 plus viewers want to get in touch with you and want to learn more about the Pearl Coalition and their efforts, can you tell us how they can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. You can visit our website at www.pearlcoalition.org. You can also email me directly at pearlcoalition@gmail.com. We're having several events. We purchased the Valkyrie, and that boat will be making a journey from California to Washington, D.C. If you're interested in joining us on that voyage, you can contact us and be a part of this historic journey, where we'll do some reenactments of coming up the Potomac, of what it was like for these passengers who were captured at that Point Lookout. There's a number of opportunities for support. So I'm looking forward to hearing from your viewers, and I thank you for your support.
All right, thank you, Mr. David Spliff. It's been a pleasure.
Truly a pleasure. Thank you, Donald.